Hey there, I'm Cody.
And I'm Kara.
Welcome to Let's Stay Home. So today we're kicking off our channel's first series, and it's focusing on all things moving. Over the course of the rest of the year, we'll be sharing every step of our moving process with tips and tricks in this multi-part series.
If you're thinking about moving or planning a move, even in the future, be sure to subscribe below. Even if you're not moving, we're going to be sharing all things decor, design, organization, cleaning, and so much more, so you'll want to stick around.
So, how we decided to move to Florida was quite the process, especially since we basically could move anywhere in the US. Well, you might not have that openness.
Yeah, you might not be moving, you might not be looking at the whole United States, but all the stuff that we're going to talk about can totally apply to you in your moving process.
Before you start this process, especially if you're moving with family, friends, or your partner, we have some tips that really helped us and we'd love to share them with you.
Tip number 1, make open and honest communication your number 1 priority. When you're making a decision as big as where you want to relocate to, it can get really heated, especially if you're thinking of one space and in love with it, and maybe your partner or other family members aren't so on board. Essentially, setting boundaries from the start by talking about deal breakers and really understanding what matters the most, not just to you, but to everyone involved, and feeling comfortable enough to be open and honest about that, and determining where you're going to move is going to make all the difference in this process, not just being easier, but enjoying it a lot more.
Tip 2, know what's most important to you when you're moving.
Before you even start considering your moving process, you really want to identify the things that are going to be the most important to you. So some of these might be weather, education and schooling, living conditions, or the cost of living, like how much rent costs, how much it costs to go out, all those sorts of things, whether you need to have a car, whether you can take public transit. Understanding these things that are most important to you will make finding where you want to relocate easier, because some places have these things and some places don't. So make sure to keep that in mind early on and it'll be a much easier process for you.
Tip 3. Oh, I did this.
How do you guys do 3? Do you do this way? Do you do this way? What are you doing this way? That's ASL, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's covered. Yeah. How do you guys do it? Let us know.
Tip number 3, create a budget. Well, it doesn't have to go down to the exact penny. Getting a general cost of the ideas of what your cost of living is going to be is really helpful.
Tip number 4. Tip number 4, figure out a rough time frame for your move. Knowing when you want to move and how much time you have to figure things out will help either put some fire under your butt to get you going, or it'll allow you to relax and enjoy the process more. For us, we needed to move out after our lease ended since we couldn't break it early without paying close to $6,000. And it ended up also being the end of hurricane season in Florida, so we had perfect timing. If we had a move out date set for maybe the middle of hurricane season, we probably would have waited until after. So having a good idea of when you're moving is going to be helpful in the relocation kind of deciding process, but also other aspects of your moving process when you get there. So with those tips in mind, now we're going to actually get into the process we use to figure out where you wanted to relocate to. Like we said earlier, for us, we were kind of looking at the whole US. So Cody came up with an awesome idea to help us narrow down. If you're in this situation, we highly recommend this. If not, you can kind of tweak it to fit your situation. But essentially the first thing that we did is we printed off 6 maps of the United States, just blank maps offline. We've linked down in the description, literally a printable United States map that we use, so you guys can use as well if you want to give this a go. And we got different colored markers, red, yellow, and green, and we started out this process figuring out where we were going to move.
So, we each took one and filled them with the 3 different colored markers. Red meaning that I would not move to this state. Yellow meaning I might move there, but I need to do a little bit more research. And green, heck yeah, I would move there right now. Filling these out by ourselves really helped us come together and compare the results. That way we wouldn't be influenced by each other's decisions.
Doing it individually, even though you're kind of doing it together, is a really important part of the process, especially if you're moving with other people, because it helps you start to learn more about the stuff that's important to you where you're moving and maybe what's important to them, as well as giving you the place afterwards once you fill everything in and chat about it, which we'll talk about more next. But it really helps you understand like where they're coming from and maybe why they like a place that you didn't like, and it gives you insights into things maybe you don't know about different places.
For example, I said no to Texas, but Kara said yes. Having visited, she knew it was a place that she could move to and loved it, but I thought that it wouldn't be the right fit.
And I think for you, a lot of the reason you weren't so sure about Texas is you hadn't been there yet, I don't think, right? And you probably had some kind of like assumptions about like what living in Texas was like, and I know like it was really important for you to get out of the Southwest since that's where we are right now.
At this point, we had agreed, said yes to probably about 22 states plus Washington, D.C.
Once you've both filled out your maps with the yes, the no, and the maybe, make sure that you go through it together and, like I said earlier, really like discuss why you said yes and no to places. If you have yes and no in common, on a third map what you're going to want to do is color in just red and green, don't color in the maybes. Color in the ones that you both agree yes to and you both agree no to. This is going to help you set your list up later on.
As for the maybe states, this is where your research starts. The next part of the process of deciding where to move is researching the states you weren't so sure about. You want to go through each state and decide from yes or no and update your third map.
Just like we mentioned before, here is going to be where you really want to take into consideration all of the important things we talked about before you even start your process, like cost of living, rent, if you're close to family, whatever those important things were to you that you decided before you started this process, make sure that in your research process with these maybe states or cities that you really look at those things, because that's going to really be the most important part of deciding to relocate there or not.
And a quick tip is to make sure to take notes of your research and keep them someplace that you can reference them later.
A really good tip in addition to that is whether you do it in a notebook or an Excel sheet. We put ours in an Excel sheet and I highly recommend you do the same. It's way easy to look up your information. Whatever you do, try to just keep it as organized as possible. The more organized you are from the beginning, the easier the whole process will be.
For us, the maybe states were Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Oklahoma, and all of the northeast coast.
From this group of states that were on our maybe list and when we were in this part of the process, we actually only ended up keeping Pennsylvania. We cut all the other states, and in fact, this is probably the part of the process we cut the most states out of our list. But it was really helpful because we discovered things that we didn't know mattered to us yet. Some of them kind of like what we found in Wyoming, for example. Cody, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wyoming is very much so a meat eater state, and Kara is a vegetarian.
So wouldn't have been a really great fit. Wyoming's really beautiful. I've traveled there, and that's definitely on our bucket list to go to Yellowstone together. But yeah, only eating meat would have been very difficult. There were lots of Reddit threads and stuff about if you're vegetarian, don't move here. It's very difficult. So.
But if you love meat, that is definitely a state for you.
Wyoming might be for you. So check it out. Once you've done all your research for maybes and you have your third map finally filled out to yeses and nos, you're gonna wanna make a list of all your yes states that you still have. At this point, with all your yes states, you're going to want to do research on the ones you haven't researched yet. So your maybe states, remember how we told you to take notes on it? This is where it's gonna come in handy. What you're gonna wanna do is make sure in your research process with all these new yes states that you've added to your list or haven't researched yet, that you look for the same thing. So again, if cost of living is really important to you, make sure to jot down what the cost of living is. If you want to know that you're close to family, maybe jot down how far the drive is from them.
Be sure to look at places other than blogs and articles. Yeah, exactly.
The typical stuff you're gonna Google that'll just pop up right away. Try to push yourself. We did a lot of YouTube videos actually.
We found a lot of really cool local realtors, travel vlogs, and that way it really helped us to just kind of research the town and see what it was really like.
And another thing too, if you ever want to do any really casual research, so if it was a Sunday and we didn't really feel like doing much, we would actually just put on house hunters in the states that we were looking at to maybe get ideas for cities we hadn't looked at, or just to better understand an area. A lot of times they tell you about the area and things like that, and you get to watch house hunters. So there's a lot of different fun ways to learn more about where you want to move or where you're potentially thinking about relocating.
Definitely a win-win. One thing we want to note is that traveling to the places can be a huge help. We did get to travel to some of the states that we wanted to before COVID happened, but we know that's not really an option right now due to all the travel restrictions and everyone's personal circumstances.
Ultimately, our decision to move to Florida was based on the fact, a lot of other reasons, but in terms of this travel bit, we both had gone there when we were younger, and so while Florida probably has changed quite a bit since we were kids, we had been there before. But regardless of that, we do strongly believe, based on even getting so close to choosing other places we've never been together, that you don't have to travel to make a relocation decision. It is helpful, but we understand with COVID that just might not be possible, and maybe with your budget that might not be possible. We do hope in the future, just like probably most people, that travel will become more normal and safe again. But until then, really do try those visual resources that Cody mentioned, like YouTube or TV, to help you make your decision.
The next step is, once you have all your yes states, it's time to look at the cities. Obviously, while you do live in a state, you live more in a particular city or town. For us, we were focused on cities because that's where we wanted to live.
Now, if you do already kind of know where you want to live within a state, for example, like when we looked at Illinois, we knew the only place we'd be looking in Illinois was Chicago. So we didn't really need to do research on cities in Illinois because we already knew where we wanted to move if we ended up moving there. So if that's the situation you're in, maybe you have friends there, family there, this step's gonna be a lot faster and a lot easier. Now, if you're way open to what cities you can move to, this step's gonna take a little more research. So take your time and don't worry about that.
At this stage, start researching cities the same way you did with your states and take notes on the things that were important to you, such as the cost of living, education, and jobs. Having the same data points will make later steps much easier.
For us, this is probably the step that took the longest since we were sorting through 20-some states at this point. That being said, this actually helped knock a lot of states off our list because we knew some cities just weren't going to be for us.
So we narrowed it down to Southern California, Seattle, Denver, Dallas, Austin, Nashville, Chicago, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Savannah, Charleston, Charlotte, Richmond, Alexandria, New York City, Brooklyn, Boston, Cleveland, and Cincinnati.
So what, 19 cities?
19 cities.
Well, it was a little more like 20 plus since Southern California wasn't a city, but we were looking at a lot of cities when we were at this point in the process.
At this point, it can feel really overwhelming, and sometimes there's a lot more cities than you really wanted to go over. So we decided that it would just be easier to organize it and go down by state.
So from our 20 plus cities that we had, like Cody said, was a little overwhelming, but going through them, we did learn a lot. Again, every part of this process, you learn more and more about the areas or yourself and what you want in your move. So from here, we narrowed it down even more. So we narrowed it down to Southern California, Seattle, Denver, Austin, Nashville, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Charleston, Charlotte, I couldn't read that one, Alexandria, Brooklyn, and Boston. We did have to write these down because there are that many cities even on our narrowed down version of the list.
With a few less cities in mind, we created, literally on our wall, a pro-con list for each of them.
We made sure to include the exact same information. So when we were looking at city to city, we knew that we could compare the exact same data points, which makes it a lot easier. Some things that we included in our list were how much the average rent cost, if we would need a car or not, maybe what kind of house we could get, like a 2 versus 4 bedroom house. For us, something that was important was distance to Disney World or Disneyland, since we're Disney Vacation Club members.
While what's important to you might be completely different than what's important to us, it is really important that you put down everything that's personal to you on this pro-con list. For example, New York City, Boston, and Brooklyn all got taken off due to cost. As much as Kara dreamed about living in a cute Brooklyn apartment, it was way too expensive.
Similarly, that's kind of what happened to us in Southern California. Even though we could kind of afford to live there, we wouldn't get a house that really checked off the boxes for us. So I think it was like we could definitely get a 2-bedroom, but there was no way we could afford a 4-bedroom. And if we did, it really was not going to be in the area we wanted to be in, and it wouldn't have been in a good area at all.
None of our final cities were bad, but they just weren't for us.
In the middle of our pro-con list of the cities we did have, we were kind of like hanging out, taking a break, and I suggested, well, hey, what if we moved to Florida?
And to that I said, heck no. Florida was one of the first places we crossed off our list because our initial thought was, ew, who moves to Florida? But then there we were, joking, actually considering it. We looked up some houses and found them to be affordable and in line with what we wanted. It seemed to be a good fit.
Disney, well, really Orlando, was where we ended up choosing as a place to live based on a whim, but it kind of goes to show that this process is what you make it, and strange stuff can happen. Places that you cross off can come back. Places that you have on that you really think you're gonna move to might not make it. That's totally okay. Basically, this process is kind of a living and breathing thing, so don't get super stressed, just enjoy it, and keep an open mind to places.
At this point, we put Orlando onto our pro-con list, and slowly but surely, it started knocking off the other ones, and here's why. First is Denver. While there wasn't anything necessarily bad about it, we thought other places made more sense. Even though I have family in Colorado, it is more extended family, and they just weren't in the areas that we were really looking in.
As for Austin, I personally loved Austin. I was actually gonna move to Austin after I graduated college in 2018, but obviously I didn't because I met Cody. So it was something that was definitely on the top of our list, but it kind of just came down to affordability. The parts of the city that we wanted to live in just weren't super in our means, or where we could live in our means. That definitely was not the size of house or type of house that we wanted. As for Indianapolis, very similar situation to Denver. There really wasn't anything wrong with Indy for what we wanted, and I have a lot of family and friends there still, but it just didn't really make sense for this portion of our life now. That's probably gonna be a place that we consider when we look to buy our first home or to really settle down and start a family, but that's not where we're at right now, so it's kind of on the back burner for our next move.
This step can be really difficult because you have to be ruthless on your pro-con list because it's time to decide where you're going to be moving. Sometimes it comes down to splitting hair details, especially when you're considering moving to places with your friends or family. But it's important to look at all of the data that you've collected and make sense for what's right for you. Plus, a little bit of going with your gut too.
Ultimately, we did end up choosing Florida, like most of you know, and it's because it checked off a lot of boxes for us. It has an affordable to us cost of living, rent was really reasonable in the budget we were looking for. We actually could end up getting a house a lot bigger than we anticipated, which is what we want because we want to be able to host. That was something really important to us. And yes, we did pick Orlando because we're near Disney. As Disney Vacation Club members and just people who love going to Disney, we wanted to have the close proximity to it and have a couple super fun, children-free years at Disney.
Overall, deciding where to move can be really stressful, and it's just really important to have fun with it and do more research.
We hope that what we've shared with you in this video today has helped you in some way or another. We hope our tips help you stay organized and have more fun with your move, and of course help you make that super important decision on where it is you want to relocate to.
If you have any questions or need any advice, feel free to leave us a comment down below.
We hope you guys found this video helpful. We'll be continuing our moving series in our coming videos, and the next steps, of course, will be focusing on planning your actual move.